Welcome to Nighttime Logic, where it is Thursday, August 21st, here in wonderful, beautiful Long Island, home of Billy Joel, the rock star Billy Joel. And then we have before I introduce the show, there is only one rule here at Nighttime Logic. You must not be too cool to like Billy Joel. And if you are...
That's exactly right.
Sarah Langan...
My husband is not allowed to listen to this. He can't know anything about it. You can't be too cool for Billy Joel.
And another person, Brian, welcome from
the
snarls of Los Angeles traffic to the questions.
My God, it's just we found out we had a school meeting for my son like earlier this week, and so it's getting really complicated.
They're springing it on you.
Sarah?
Good to see you.
Yeah, welcome, nice Brian. Welcome. Yeah, we're live. We're live, Brian. We're on the air.
Oh.
We're talking about the questions that matter. We're talking about the newest and most important question for the show, which is, do you like the rock musician from Long Island, New York, Billy Joel, or does he hurt your eardrums?
You know, I grew up with Billy Joel.
Yay!
But that now it's reached a point where I've had enough Billy Joel. It's like I got filled with him at a certain point. And I would have to, something weird would have to happen for me to willingly listen to Billy Joel.
Maybe you need to watch the documentary then. Maybe.
That could do it. I mean, that's
or go back to Long Island.
All right, yeah. Sarah, is that an acceptable answer? Is our time with Brian over, or can Brian?
It kind of is. I'm sorry.
What? Right, is that a gong? Are we going to change the gong?
You and my husband can talk about it. He grits his teeth. And because I was like, we could do some Billy Joel when we got married at our wedding. And he was like, no.
Yeah. You know, I did like the Billy Joel in the Boys, when all the kind of Billy Joel themed stuff in the Boys.
Oh, I missed it.
Yeah.
I mean fair enough. I grew up on Long Island, so Billy Joel has such a soft spot. It was such a formative thing. There is part of me that understands that, it's not the same as when I was younger, but and when I did listen to a lot of Billy Joel in the pandemic, but it was for it felt very nostalgic to me. It felt like I was consciously listening to it to feel like I was in a place, as opposed to like being in Madison Square Garden with people, like just having like a primary emotional reaction. So I'm not backing off my love for Billy Joel, because I still feel like there was something very iconically 70s and something special about it, but no,
I think you're right. I don't think there's any primary emotional reaction.
Yeah, and I have to say, I did listen to the newest Billy Joel song, and I honestly felt like I thought it was written by AI. It honestly felt like it was like it was so like it wasn't bad, but it felt like it was just almost like an artist like completely uninspired, trying to imitate themselves, like right down to the lyrics. So not only can Sarah's husband not listen to us, Billy Joel can't listen to it either, because we only want to say nice things to him. But enough about Billy Joel. This is Nighttime Logic. It's Thursday, August 21st. We're coming at you from Long Island, home of Billy Joel, home of Sarah Langan once upon a time, home of myself. This is
that explains it. That explains your Billy Joel love right there.
Okay. Yeah. You're not in a strange liminal space where you're like, wait a minute, I thought this was the fiction podcast, and I'm
like texting my uncles, like, what'd you think of the documentary? We're all.
My parents asked me that, like they were so sweet. They were like, "Did you watch the Billy Joel documentary?" I'm like, "Not yet." They're like, "You probably know all about it." I'm like, "Well, like I do admit to like I do watch like those old. I like that vibe of like the old Billy Joel stuff. There's something very nostalgic about it." But tonight we are gonna. This is the Summer of Liminal Space, part 3. We're gonna hear from works. Brian and Sarah are gonna read from us, but we're also gonna talk a bit about liminal space and fiction, and question it and figure it out or not together. So let me introduce. I never introduce myself. My name is Daniel Braum. I'm the host of the show. my newest book is called Creatures of Liminal Space, hence the summer of liminal space. And my next book was just announced today. It's called Phantom Constellations, and that's coming out in the fall from Cemetery Dance Publications. Sarah Langan is our guest. She grew up on Long Island, as you now know, and she got her MFA in creative writing from Columbia University and also received her master's in environmental health, science, and toxicology from New York University. She now lives in Los Angeles with her husband, who does not like Joel, her daughters, and her rabbits. She's received 3 Bram Stoker Awards for her fiction, and her work has often been included in the Best of the Year lists and anthologies. She's a founding board member of the Shirley Jackson Awards and works in both film and prose. Her latest novels are A Better World and Good Neighbors, and we might hear about some that are coming. And her latest novellas are Pam Kowalski is a Monster, and You Have the Prettiest Mask. You can find her at sarahlangan.com. Thanks so much for being here, Sarah. It's great to see you.
That's great to be here. Thanks.
And welcome back to the show. Welcome back to Sarah. She's been here before. We're very fortunate for that. Fortunate to have you back, Brian. Brian Evenson is the author of a dozen books, most recently the short story collection. Not most recently. I know you've had some since then, but one of the recent ones is The Glassy Burning Floor of Hell, the song for The Unraveling of the World, won the Shirley Jackson Award and the World Fantasy Award, and was a finalist for the Ray Bradbury Prize. Other recent books include A Collapse of Horses, The Warren. His novel, Last Days, won the ALA USA Award for the Best Horror Novel of 2009. His novel, The Open Curtain, was a finalist for an Edgar Award and an International Horror Guild Award. He lives in Los Angeles and teaches at Cal Arts. His short story collection, Good Night, Sleep Tight, was published in 2024 and is currently a finalist for the World Fantasy Award, if I'm not mistaken. You can find him at brianevenson.com. Welcome, Brian. And I'll be asking the two of you about some of your recent work as well to update those bios. So yeah, in addition to talking about Billy Joel, before we were sound checking, we're talking about kids going back to school and how August, I called it the endless summer, but how August for me was, it was always this weird psychological or this weird time that like, and when Sarah and I were talking, Sarah's like, yeah, well, we can talk about liminal space, but what is liminal space? So I'm like, well, let's talk about that. I'm a pretty newcomer to the term. When I named the book Creatures of Liminal Space, I thought, oh, what a great obscure term that I have. It's going to fit my stuff. Little did I know that this term liminal space seems to be enjoying some sort of a zeitgeist, or at least one of the definitions of liminal space is almost like an internet-driven aesthetic about some sort of these dark abandoned spaces. But I think it also has other meanings. I think definitionally it comes from the Latin of threshold, or it means perhaps anywhere that's in between one place and another. So Brian, we'll start with you. Do you have any thoughts on liminal space, even if not definitionally? We could talk about it in general, but we could talk about it. We could talk about it in fiction, or how it might play out.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think the thing I find interesting about the idea of a liminal space is just the idea that you're between spaces, and so it's neither one thing nor quite another thing. And the fiction that I really tend to like is fiction that seems to have like 1 foot in one genre camp and then 1 foot in literature or in another genre camp, and so it's kind of straddling things in a way that makes it both be able to take advantage of the qualities of a genre, but also it keeps it from feeling kind of too enclosed. And I would argue that a lot of weird fiction, what we think of as weird fiction, is liminal, in the sense that it is this. If you look at something like Anne and Jeff Vandermeer's anthology, The Weird, it's like really what they do with that anthology is they take stuff that was published in fantasy magazines, science fiction magazines, literary magazines, kind of all over the place, and start to look, what is it that connects these pieces that maybe had, very different kind of initial genre life. People thought of them in one way, but they were always on the edge of a genre. They were always not quite fitting into it. And what is it? Is there a characteristic that kind of holds them together? And so I guess that I would say, I really, when I think about Liminal, the thing that appeals to me is just that idea of not only being in between, but figuring out a way to stay in between. I'll also say, I was trained as a critical theorist, and liminal was a word that got used a lot when I was studying theory. And so much so that I was really tired of it. And so it took me a while to kind of come back around to the idea of it. But yeah, that's interesting.
Right, I think your mic might be hitting your mic might be hitting your shirt, or you might be hitting your mic.
It's very likely, yes. All right.
Before we move on to Sarah, there's two really interesting things. It's so fascinating to me that liminal is a term that's used in academia or critical theory. Like I am so inexperienced in there, and like it's just so, to me the word is so new, like brand new, like 2024 new, and to hear that's something like, oh yeah, I'm like, maybe I'll find my way back to it, or maybe I never will. I'm so tired of it. Is so typical me, and it's just so fascinating. But I like that you are looking at the liminal space in terms of it's almost definitionally as to interstitial. Like I hear fiction being called like interstitial fiction, and I really like that. Sarah, what are your thoughts when you hear the term liminal space or liminal space in fiction?
I think before you started recording, you said you were going to ask about liminal spaces. And I was like, what does that mean? Like, what are we talking about? Like,
another great question.
You said one of my books, and I was like, oh, okay, it's something that doesn't fit in a box, right? And I feel like every artist, that's all we want to be doing is stuff that doesn't fit in a box, but how do you sell it? So I think everything is, everything I like writing is liminal, I would guess.
Yeah, I mentioned, if I could say, I mentioned one of my favorite novels, not just by you, Sarah. It's a novel, Audrey's Door, which I just have great affection for that novel. And even before I knew
they're re-releasing it.
Oh, fantastic!
Is that fun?
Yeah, that's great to hear. And for purposes of our discussion, like not only is Audrey's Door and works like it liminal or interstitial in the way that Brian is using it, or the way you're using it, Sarah, and like, yeah, it definitely doesn't fit in a box. I think the book Audrey's Door, without too many spoilers, since it's coming out again, and you should grab this book if you're not already, it fits some of the definitions or some of the places of what I'm thinking about as liminal, both in terms of physicality. Audrey's Door in many ways is about a place, like the building itself, and the main character Audrey is very much in a liminal space of a new life, on the threshold of a new life, in between different iterations of herself, and she really embodies a psychological aspect of it. So I was going to ask. One of the final questions before the reading, but we'll move it up, was liminal space in your works. What were you thinking about both the building and the character, Sarah, when you were writing Audrey's Door?
So I think for me personally, I'm obsessed with holes, like holes in thinking, holes of comprehension, holes in memory. And so every story I write is about some lack of understanding of the main character, of their own life, because I find that so terrifying. But it's sort of every human's journey at the same time. And you see the people who haven't acknowledged that, and they're wrong, like they're messed up by the time they're mature adults. And but it's so painful to look at the holes and to reevaluate them. And so in every book, Audrey's door was holes, but also because of 9/11. Like I, was very affected by 9/11.
Good Neighbors is quite literally full. It's like it's not even Winterhall. Good Neighbors. It's like you could have retitled that "The Giant Sinkhole in Suburbia."
And what do you do? What does that mean? What does a hole mean? And people can project anything they want to on it.
Yeah.
And so, I put onto that this building that sort of channels specifically those the full emptiness, how else to put it, inside of people, and reflects them back in terrible ways.
Yeah. Thoughts on holes and thoughts on empty reflections, Brian. Over to you.
I mean, I do love that kind of idea of a building being able to kind of capture nothingness is a really interesting idea, and it's such a different, amazing take on the haunted building as well. And of course, it goes in. That's not all that's going on, obviously.
Yeah.
With Audrey's door. So I guess I would say, I mean, the other thing I was thinking about when I was just thinking about liminality was in anthropology, it gets used to talk about the moment in a ritual, like an initiation ritual, where you don't know what the hell's going on. And so it's like the moment you start and then you reach this middle point where it feels like anything could happen or everything could go crazy. And then you kind of come out of it and you're changed and transformed. And that's the thing I really love about it. And I think that in a way that ties into what you're saying with holes as well, because it's like, it's the lack of knowledge. It's not knowing something about yourself or not knowing something about the world. And that being something that just exists as an emptiness that you can't resolve or fill.
There's that story of yours, Brian, about the sisters and the sort of dance.
Yeah.
That reminds me of that.
Yeah. I mean, I that definitely is something I realized that right when I was saying it that I was actually alluding to my own story.
But hearing both of you talk about these definitions, really, it makes perfect sense to hear these. I'm like, oh yeah, like I see that in both of your works. Like, I was seeing that the two different definitions of liminality in both of your work, and it's fascinating to me how one is almost a real dangerous empty space that Sarah's talking about, like the empty space that grows and consumes, or the empty space that is very malignant. And Brian's is it's adjacent to that, but it's almost it's walking with that danger, but like with an awareness and a positive intent, like in the shamanistic practice. But in both of those places is like, it's in between something, and in those psychological emptiness and like the emptiness of damaged people, it's like, we don't know where it's going, but it's going to end bad. And in the shamanistic tradition, it's like, we don't know where it's going, but the intention at least is for positivity. You guys
the thing that's the most terrifying to me is when I think I know something and then I realize I don't know it, that I was wrong, and then it's like the whole foundation kind of goes out. And so that thing of knowing or not knowing is like really,
I love
it's kind of very central. Yeah.
I love and hate that. Do you find are you able to capture that? I know you guys both chase it. And a couple of things are coming to mind. Are you able? Do you feel like you've either aimed for it, and have you captured it in your fiction, Brian?
There's this line, like my favorite play is Our Town, and the woman. But now I've just blanked on everyone's name. Emily is like, does everyone know? Like, how do they? How can they not know how sweet life is? And the neighbor says saints and poets maybe. And my husband was like, I would argue the opposite.
Watch your microphone, if you could.
Me?
No, Brian. It's still making
bad guy. But no, and my husband was like, I would argue the opposite. I think we are so into getting the work right and cobbling word after word and story like a Rubik's Cube and making things perfect that we miss a lot of life. And I would say I chase in my work, I chase these revelations. I would be curious what my children have to say in 30 years about whether I was capable of chasing them in real life. I can probably reflect on my hand the number of times I've been able to go, I was completely wrong. I was so wrong. And this is the way that I've made changes. Not a ton of times. And I don't know. I think there's a balance. But this notion that artists can see, I don't think it's true. I think we can see in the words, and maybe we can see in other people, but I don't know that we can see in ourselves.
Yeah, it's much easier to see in a kind of controlled space of fiction, I think, than in life. Just there's so many variables in life. And
I would agree that I don't think artists can see. I think we're just as blind as everyone else.
Or more so.
Or maybe more so. Steering it towards horror, I was thinking about, like, I definitely can point to it in life. I'm not going to share because that would just be massive oversharing, but categorically, some of the worst feelings that I experience is like having trust in someone or thinking they know it. And then that moment when I realize, I'm like, wait a minute, this person is not in control. And I've been following whatever, a narcissist, a blind person, and then I'm like, oh, those have been some of the most horrific moments in my personal life. And I would love to try to figure out a way of incorporating that into fiction. This might be completely off track because I'm now thinking of Starship Troopers. Have either of you read Heinlein's Starship Troopers? I think it's like a bad example because it has nothing to do with like the psychological of everyday people, but it's a moment when the insect creatures land on Pluto, and everyone's like, "Wait a minute, we thought they were bugs. Why are they landing spaceships on Pluto?" And it's for me, it was a focal point in the story, which is very much satirizing and condemning the military institutions, but it's like, oh, these people who like the story and the narrative was supposed to be one thing, and then it's the place where the people in control are forced to say, wait a minute, this whole narrative, the whole way we've been fighting it is just completely wrong. And granted, it's a very crude science fictional narrative, but it's the one that's coming to mind right now.
No, it's the reality of like our perception literally as a human species is so limited.
Yeah.
Just the colors we see, the words we hear, the distance between vision and cognition, and what gets lost in translation. I mean, we've identified certain people as neurodivergent, but I suspect we're all in some idiosyncratic way interpreting data differently.
That's brilliant. Absolutely. I think you said you wonder about your children 30 years from now and their perceptions. Just the state of science. There's so much that we call pseudoscience or paranormal or magic that science is just racing into the future, and so much of what we don't even know or don't understand is going to be in our knowledge base. Hopefully, and that fits right in with neurodivergence and just the different ways people perceive things. And I think it's just people moving forward in the capability of just the human physiology, just not uniformly, just the way people perceive things. Or just people like me, who I'm just like that guy from Guardians of the Galaxy, where I'm just super slow. I'm like, what? What did you say? Do you guys have any favorite examples of these kinds of liminalities and liminal spaces in fiction, or even in horror?
I just finished Shirley Hazard's The Bus on Tuesday.
What's that one about?
It's wackadoo. It's like this kind of stuff I love, which is just like totally fucked up woman main character who's making really bad decisions. And you're like, oh, she slept with her student's what, and then she's drunk, and then supernatural things start to happen, and you can't even tell whether they are. I think that it's sort of like if Sharp Objects had supernatural aspects, and I think that's a liminal novel.
What kind of supernatural things start to come into play?
Oh, what kind?
Yeah, or just tell me one of them.
It's just sort of it's the confusion of, I guess, in a Shirley Jackson level of like, and Shirley Jackson gets the teeth removed in that story, and like she comes in knowing who she is, and she walks out and she doesn't even know how to go home. Like she's the teeth and the gas, and like she's just been lifted out of her identity. Well, that's sort of what's happening to the main character. Like she wakes up in strange places, and people know things about her, and they're, in the house. It's sort of the worst, most horrific. What's that movie, Wake and Fright, set in Australia?
Oh, yeah.
It's so good, right? It's so good.
That movie, that movie hurt me.
It's like crazy.
Yeah,
it's that kind of like, you're like, could this be this bad?
I'm so glad you mentioned that.
I suspect it is that bad in the story, but I also suspect it's like there's this supernatural or godlike malice involved.
Yeah, I love movies or pieces of fiction where even if they're not overtly supernatural, where it's just operating or it's structural that way. I didn't read the first one, but Wake and Fright is a great example of it, of where it's like it's intended to be non-supernatural at all, but it bears the hallmarks and the shapes and the confusion and that in-between state where it's operating as supernatural. A movie that strangely did that for me was Robert Altman's The Long Goodbye. I don't know if this movie is revered or shunned, but there's like one middle part. It's so 70s. There's a psychologist, and I don't know if it's just so badly acted or badly written, where I'm like, wait a minute, is there like psychic stuff happening here? He's just like arguing with the the private eye character, where I'm like, it felt supernatural to me. Also, the film version of No Country to Old Men,
for Old Men,
Javier Bardem's performance was just so otherworldly, where it's like, you're like, wait a minute, this is a literal crime film, but it's also operating like you could just say, the people say, oh, okay, this is a movie about the Grim Reaper, it's about death. You could be like, yeah, okay, I could totally see the two states of it as well.
I love movies too where it feels like there's an actor in the movie who is playing a different role than different. He's like in a different movie, or she's in a different movie than everybody else. So you get a sense that
in a good way,
in a good way, where you get a sense that it's almost like there's two different things going on, and the other actors in the movie. I'm trying to think of a good example of this, and I think it's like Daniel Day-Lewis sometimes is so good at what he does that you feel like it's almost like he's in a different space. But the story I was thinking of is Isaac Denison's The Monkey, which is really simple in some ways, but it reaches a point where it gets so weird at the end of the story. It's hard to make sense of what's going on. And it's like, I've read that story a dozen times, and it's still like, I get to this moment near the end of the story and I'm like, what? But in a good way, where it's just, I feel like it just completely unnerves me.
Is that a novel or a short story?
It's a short story. It's like a 60-page short story.
What I haven't read that.
I'm writing it down.
Yeah, what is it about? Give us a little bit of a setup without not.
It's about it's about a nun, actually, and there's just I don't want to say too much because it'll give it away, but it's called The Monkey, and some very odd things happen as it goes along, and most of the story just feels like a realistic story, and then as you reach the end, it just becomes something different.
Okay.
Who's it by?
Isaac Denison is who it's by. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, I look forward to checking that out. Going back to Wake and Fright, there's a
Brian,
scene.
Did you see it?
I have. It's been a long time, but I loved it.
Apparently, that movie there was something about it. Like, apparently, it was lost for a while, or maybe it was just marketing. But when it came back, I caught it on Shudder sometime within the last 10 years, and people like, oh, this was the lost movie, or this was, apparently it was controversial in its time for completely different reasons than we're talking about. I think maybe just some of the sexual relationships, I think at the time were
time. They're still kind of shocking for a mainstream movie.
Yeah.
Okay. Especially turn back the clock 50 years then, for sure. I mean, but the scene that really hit me, and I think it can be seen as a liminal space. A good example of a horrific liminal space was the content. I guess trigger warning. It's they go out into the outback, which I guess is in its own way a liminal space. And for no apparent reason, that they just go on a kangaroo hunt to just shoot the kangaroos. And I'm sensitive to that. So I'm just like, I'm not sure I know I don't want to be watching this. And then when I read about it after the fact, that apparently that was just, that was just a real thing. It was really, and that's like, okay, if I watch that movie again, I'm definitely not watching that scene, that scene again. We talked about liminal space in both your works, but it's something I want to talk more about it. Sarah, Audrey's Door looms large for me. Do you think you use the liminal either intentionally or looking?
Love that you always bring that up, because my publisher dropped me for that. I couldn't get a contract for years. People
my God,
raged by that book. They were mad.
I'm calling it like I see it.
We thought she was the next Stephen King. She wrote a girl book. Like, it was terrible.
A case of the powers that be being wrong about something great. What
made me so happy was you made me read Audrey's Door for something else, not for this.
Yeah, I'm like, not only is it my favorite novel, not only is it my favorite Sarah Langan novel, it's I'm like, I think in one of the Haunted Houses broadcasts, I'm just like, all right, Audrey's Door is the best haunted house. It's like, I just love that book, and
it makes me happy because you made me read that. I wrote it off when I believe my critics, there's something wrong with me that I can't defend my own work. I always believe my critics, and so you made me read. You were like, no, I want you to read Audrey's Door, and I was like, and then I opened it, and I was like, this is a good book, and
I'll never
made me so happy.
It's not a good book. It's a freaking kick-ass. It's a kick-ass book. I'll never tell anyone what to do, but if I'm come close to giving some advice, like, don't believe your critics, only the good stuff. Is there any liminality or not in some of the new stuff? Maybe some of the novellas, or tell us about some of the new stuff you got coming down the pipe, if you're allowed to.
Yeah.
It's so exciting to me.
Well, I just came out with this novella called Pam Kowalski is a Monster, and that's definitely liminal. It's sort of like
what a great title.
The vein I was talking about, that Shirley Hazard bus on Tuesday. This woman decides to take her high school frenemy, who's now a famous online psychic, down. And the online psychic is predicting the end of the world, and it's like, but is it real? And then I have Squid Teeth, just came out on Reactor a few months ago, and it's this artist who's just pissed that she's not more successful, but it's good. It's good. It's super weird. People are like, this is so weird, and it's because it's this art of making plates with your mouth. And then
is that one called? Let me hold you on that one for a second. Is that one called Squid Teeth?
Squid Teeth.
And where can we catch up with that one?
Reactor.
Okay, so it's online on Reactor?
Yeah.
Okay. And
and then
in addition to just being great and weird, what how did you pitch it to them? What how did you sell it?
I didn't. I was this terrible thing happened to my friend that involved a foster child. And I couldn't sleep all night, and I was so upset about it that I wrote the only way I knew how to talk about it, which was what is unfairness for an artist, which is how did I make it about me? And I did, and it was so she's this main character, they make plates, and then they go to, but you're not, even if she's the best, she has to be bona fide by the important people. And it's this off-brand bread loaf. It's obviously bread loaf, and they all go there, and what they do to her at Bread Loaf.
Wow.
Which I'm still they make you serve, like,
Yeah.
and
Did you say surf or serve?
serve. You get to go to Breadloaf and serve your heroes.
It's very hierarchical the way that Bread Loaf works. It's pretty
And
awful.
is
Yeah.
Breadloaf a work? Is that a writing workshop or what is that?
It's where like the literary. I won't put an adjective on that. People.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah, and then I have another short story. I've wrote a lot of stories. Does Harlan Latner dream of electric sheep? And that came
I
out
love
on
that title.
Lightspeed like 3 months ago. And it's like a novelette, and it's like everyone is now hooked up to like everybody works for Amazon, and we're all like hooked up, and Amazon doesn't upgrade, and it fucks everybody up. And then I have a short thing coming out on Lightspeed this week, like a really short one. And then my novel Tradwife, I just handed into my editors, my US and UK editors.
Congratulations. Tell us about Tradwife. What's what can you tell?
I can tell you that it's real horror. Like, I haven't gone horror.
Wow.
So I mean, people might say it has. To me, it's not in the liminal space. To me, it's like, yeah, you know, and it's about. Excuse me, I had like a late lunch. It's about a reporter who went viral and then was canceled because by the far right. And in order to redeem herself, she goes to live with a famous online trad wife for a week, and is going to like shadow her and then write a piece about it. And that's the setup.
Sarah, what I love about all four of those that you've just mentioned, it feels like you are, if not single-handedly, you're definitely leading the charge on you're doing for horror what classic or what good science fiction does for science fiction. Great science fiction is, in the trappings of the genre, writing about and critiquing life today, and all these premises. It sounds like they're forward-looking, but they're also they're saying something about the here and now and in the most horrific ways. So that sounds like an exciting reading list, and really looking forward to it. How about you, Brian? How are you seeing the liminal, or just tell us about what's coming down the pipe, or what's on the pipeline for you right now?
I have a novel that's a sequel to a previous book I wrote called Last Days, which is coming out, called Phantom Limb. And it's come out in France already. It's not going to come out in the US for almost a year, I think. And it looks like it'll come out in Germany and the Czech Republic first as well. So it feels very strange.
Are these going to be English, or are they translations?
Those are all translations. So
did you write it? Did you write them?
I wrote. No. I can't. Okay. No, I wrote in English. But yeah, for whatever reason, that's just delays with my publisher. They went through some kind of structuring and things, and so as a result, everything's a little delayed. So it's a book that I'm really happy with. I wish people could read it in English before a year from now, but it'll be a year from now. So
I feel like it's usually a good sign, though, when they hold it up.
I hope so. Yeah. I think that hopefully that's the case, and I do think that may be the case. It also just may be the case that they're just really messed up. So,
well, we'll give them more time.
Welcome to 2025.
I know. Yeah,
more time to correct it. I'd love to hear some readings from both of you. Do we have a volunteer of who would like to read first?
I have to go get something.
Okay, so let's have Brian go first while you go get something.
Okay, all right.
All right, Brian. We'll let Sarah go get a wonderful something, hopefully a wonderful story for us. And would you like to introduce your work?
Yes, happy to. So I'm going to read a story. It's a little bit of an older story, which is called And Yet. It originally was going to come out in a collection I wrote called Collapse of Horses.
Yes.
And it was in the galley of that, but we ended up, for various reasons, pushing it off. So it didn't come out until I published a little book called None of You Shall Be Spared with Weird House. and it's in there. So, and it feels like it fits the theme we're talking about. So
yeah, wonderful. And you feel free to take the time you need to read the entire story. To just go for it. I'm going to turn you over to the solo layout. Here's
sounds good.
Brian Evenson, people.
And yet, it was only much later, months after her boyfriend had vanished, that Ellie's sense of him truly began to fall apart. So much so that as time went on, she found she could no longer even bring herself to call him by his name. Not with her voice, not in writing, not even in her thoughts. She could have a name. She was a real person. But he, who knew what he was capable of? Probably anything. And yet, even as she came to realize the full extent of his betrayal, part of her still held back. Part of her remembered him fondly, despite everything. Part of her still wanted to call him by a name, still wanted to call him by the name he had used with her, Rob, short for Robert. Short for Robert, she had once asked, and then he had just shrugged. Of course it must be short for Robert, she had told herself at the time. What else could it be short for? But now she wondered. And yet, part of her still wanted to ignore the fact that on more than one occasion, when she was tired, when she was distracted, he hadn't answered to that name, to Rob, despite her repeating it over and over, louder and louder. When she finally attracted his attention, he would regard her in a way that her memory now thought of as furtive, as if caught. Once she began to see the cracks in someone, what could you do but continue to see more and more cracks? What could you do but wonder why you hadn't seen them sooner? And wonder, too, what cracks you hadn't seen yet. But you had trained yourself well, even when you were seeing them, staring right at them, tracing them with the pad of your finger. Another part of you was talking sternly and reasonably in her head, saying, no, that's not what it looks like, Ellie. This is Rob we're talking about. He's the guy who loves you. He said so himself. Someone who loves you would never do something so terrible to you. No. There must be a logical explanation. First, there had been a photograph that he had left behind, that had slipped between the desk and the wall, and that she had found long after he was gone, when she was searching for some clue of what might have become of him. It was a new print of an old photograph, a tow-headed boy standing between a man and a woman, presumably a son with his mother and father. A bright sky, pale, almost white, a bleached-out picket fence behind. A bit of peeling house, a sliver of scorched yard. It was him, in fact, or so he had told her when he first showed her the photograph, identifying himself as the boy by tapping the pale, round face with his finger. And there was his mother, Margaret, and his father, Stanley, the Swensons. It was taken, he claimed, in Tooele, Utah, in the backyard of his boyhood home. His parents were good people, he had said, religious, faithful, but not strident, and they had taught him the values he still held today. She had waited expectantly for him to tell her a story to illustrate this and to explain what those values were. But as with so many other things, he had left it at that. It lingered in the air, waiting for her to pluck it up, but she had simply let it hang. Now he was gone, and he had little left beyond this photograph. She kept it and looked at it and looked at it, trying to understand what it wanted to tell her about her missing boyfriend's family. She stared at it for a long time until her eyes felt dry and raw in their sockets, but nothing came to her. So she wrote on the back in pencil the names of his parents, the names he had told her: Margaret, Stanley, Rob, the Swensons, as if that might help somehow. When she could admit to herself that he wasn't coming back, when she had looked enough times at the photograph, touched it enough that she had begun to ruin it, she decided to take action. The photograph gave her permission to do so, in a way. Its existence proved that she had known him, that she had not just imagined him, that he had been there, living in her house, living with her. So she found the phone book for Tooele, Utah online and searched for a Margaret or a Stanley Swenson. No hits. Well, maybe they had moved, she thought, her throat suddenly dry. Sure, that was what must have happened. But no, a part of her realized, their names should still come up, even if they'd moved. The directory database had former addresses, too. She shook her head, forced a laugh. Maybe she'd gotten the name wrong. She tried Svensson and Svensson and Swanson, but without result. Perhaps they had moved before the database started keeping records, she reasoned. She tried still to search the photograph for clues, tried still to see his grown face in the photograph of the little boy, tried still to connect to him through it. But something had changed. Everything rang hollow now, just a little off. She might have been able to live with that. In time, she might have forgotten. She would have gone on to other things, found a new boyfriend, continued her life. But she took the photograph to work. She left it on her desk, not framed. That would have been too much, but just casually tossed there, a kind of presence. There was something to be said for that. If the photograph was at work, she wouldn't be tempted to look at it when she was at home, alone. But it also meant that it was with her 9 hours a day, always ready to surprise her whenever she dropped her guard and glanced down. It was on the desk beside her when, several months on, unexpectedly, she realized she was seeing the image not on her desk, but on her computer screen. She had been browsing a website that sold stock images. She was looking for a family to use for an ad, and suddenly there it was, the photograph of the Swensons, Margaret, Stanley, Rob, a stock image. She looked from desk to screen and back again. They were exactly the same. She felt something drain out of her. She left early, feigning illness. To her coworkers, she explained nothing of what had actually happened. She wouldn't, she felt, know where to start. And she couldn't help but think of this, of the way he had deceived her as something that cast her in a bad light. Besides, she still wasn't quite sure how he had deceived her, or why. Didn't she have to know? Didn't she have to understand it herself before she could begin to explain it to others? And maybe an increasingly smaller part of her insisted there is still an explanation. It was a stock photo, but so what? That didn't mean it wasn't a photo of his family. They were real people, weren't they? Maybe his family was the sort of representative American family of which stock photos were made. But the putative name of the boy, according to the website, was Timothy, not Rob. The name of the family, the Jacksons. And yet, who was to say that that was their real name? Or maybe she was simply confused and he hadn't presented the photo to her as his family, but had it for another reason. She turned the house over looking for another family photo, for the so-called real family photo, but didn't find it. No, she had to admit, this was the photo. She was certain, or almost certain. There was only the narrowest possibility that she might be wrong. She called in sick, then called in sick again. Across a feverish 48-hour period in bed with her laptop, she went through every source for stock images she could find until she found 2 more photographs that she was nearly almost certain she remembered him showing her. Were they really the same images? She had nothing to compare them to. No. She was exhausted, sleepless. Maybe she was starting to see things that weren't there. But another part of her was certain, yes, that they were the same photographs, that every image of his past that he'd offered her was a lie. That part of her no longer had any idea if he even had a past. Had he even been there at all, or had she just imagined him? She lay in bed. She slept a little. Her dreams were vague and troubling and kept waking her up. At times, she felt like there was someone else in the bed with her, but when she opened her eyes, there never was. In the end, still tired, she found she could no longer keep her eyes closed. She lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, her heart racing, wondering what she should do. No, there was nothing she could do. Any steps she took, she felt, would only make things worse. To do anything, to put any more energy into it, was to betray herself. Yet the next day, she went to his former workplace, or what he had claimed to be his former workplace. She found he had never worked there, at least not under his own name. Or rather, not under the name Rob. But she would not stop. She would not be denied. She went from cubicle to cubicle describing him, was asked by a few worried faces if she had a photograph, but no, she didn't have a photograph, and it was hard to explain why. She realized, coming across as hysterical, a little anyway, was reaching the point where security would have to be called. But then someone suggested maybe she didn't mean Rob, but Tom, who had left a while back. She clung to that, Tom. It could be him. And now she had a name, Tom, and soon a full name, Tom Peters, with 2 E's, and even an indication of where he was from, somewhere in Nebraska, a town with the unlikely name of Broken Bow. Maybe this was his real name. Maybe now she finally had him. But when she tried to trace the name on the internet, she only found an obituary of a man 10 years dead, a man who resembled her missing boyfriend not at all. She could have fingerprints taken, she told herself. There were probably still some in the house. She could have someone go through the house and lift them from surfaces he had touched. But that seemed too much. Even to her, that was going too far. If the fingerprints came back without a match, that was not something she felt she could ever come back from. So where did that leave her? She was no closer to knowing who he was, or why he had come into her life, or why, and this was more important, he had suddenly left. Was it something she had done? Had some other past caught up with him? Had he simply left because that was what he always did? She remembered suddenly, almost more vividly than she could bear, the moment they had met. He had been sitting on a bench waiting for a bus, the 42, and he had sat down. She had been sitting on a bench waiting for a bus, the 42, and he had sat down beside her. He had said something awkward, and she had responded casually, and slowly something had started to build. A few more hasty exchanges at the bus stop, then running into one another downtown near where they both worked. She couldn't remember the details, or rather now, after everything, she had given herself permission not to remember the details. But she couldn't forget how it had felt. Lunch, a few dinners, and suddenly they were living together. He was living in her house, and she was making plans to spend her life with him. God, she had told a friend, had sent him to her. Had he? Or had she been targeted by him, by Rob, not God, for some reason? The whole of their courtship had been wonderfully sweet. No, despite everything, despite all she had learned in the meantime, surely at least that was real. Surely he had meant it. He couldn't take that away from her. Or maybe he could. She could not hate him fully, nor could she forgive him fully. Her only option was to try to forget him. And yet that was exactly what she found she could not possibly do. What did he say just before he left me? She found herself wondering as she waited for the 42 to take her back to work weeks later, once her sick leave was over, once she was trying to piece her life back together. Nothing significant, nothing that later in retrospect seemed charged with meaning. He had said good morning. Then he had taken a shower. Maybe he had said something about the breakfast she had made him, or maybe that had been the day before. Then he had left for work like any other day. But he hadn't come back. Or rather, he'd come back while she was at work and packed everything that belonged to him and left. Or someone, anyway, had come and taken his things. Had something happened to him? Was he alive? Had he simply moved on to the next set of lies, to the next hapless girl he wanted to deceive? So what was real? That was what she was left wondering. What, if anything, that he had said or done? What, if anything, that they had shared had been real? What about the glass he had kept all the time they had been together? The ordinary smooth blue glass that he had claimed had belonged to a former girlfriend who had committed suicide. What about the heartfelt story he had told her about that glass? Who was to say that was true either? Maybe this girlfriend was still alive and well and idly wondering what had happened to the sixth glass in her set. What object had he, Rob, stolen from her, Ellie, and he would build a story up around for the next woman he fooled? Maybe there was no former girlfriend, at least not one attached to a glass. Maybe he had simply seen the glass in a thrift shop and thought, what story shall I build up around you? But why tell her about the suicide if it wasn't true? What could he possibly gain by lying about it? Surely there were some things that had to be true, weren't there? No, she thought, he wasn't human. There was something seriously wrong with him. She was better off without him, much better. If he returned, part of her knew, she might have a very hard time not letting him back into her life. She would demand an explanation, of course, but then once she had it, no matter how implausible, no matter how superficial, no matter how irrational, she would accept it. There, floating above her in the dark, she conjured up the honesty of his face, the openness of his expression, the way his gaze welcomed her in and drew her to him. That was all she really had to put against everything that had collapsed, the lies in his absence. But it was something anyway, and something, late at night at least, that she couldn't quite forget. She lay in bed, staring up into the dark, his imagined face slowly fading in and out, there and yet not, real and yet not, enough and yet not. What would it take, she wondered, to prevent her life from being an endless series of and yets? Was there anything that could stop it? Was there anything that could save her? And now that this had happened to her, how could she believe anything or anyone ever again? She didn't want to be the kind of person who couldn't trust someone, but she didn't see any way around it, not after this. No, this was the end, she told herself. She could never be in a relationship again. She absolutely could not go on. She lay there in the dark, letting it all sink in. Then she told herself was the final word. There was nothing left. And yet, how many nights would she pass like this? Nights where she would lie awake and suffering and wanting to die until the world outside finally lit palely up again. And not knowing what else to do, she would get up and muddle through her day, waiting for the hours to pass and the next night to come. How many more nights could she bear? They would come and go, she felt, and each time they did, they would leave less of her behind, until finally there wouldn't be anything left to speak of her, of Ellie, of Ellie. And only then she tried to console herself, will I understand him? I will have no name. I will move through the world without regard for anything around me. I will steal the names of the dead, she told herself. I will make stories and inflict them upon objects. She lay in the dark, not knowing whether to be terrified or elated. Her mouth was dry, her heart racing. And then, she continued grimly, I will be the one leaving rather than the one left. That's it.
Fantastic, fantastic. Tell us one more time the name of the story and where we can catch up with that story, Brian.
It's called And Yet, and it's in None of You Shall Be Spared, which is a collection that a Weird House put out.
Fantastic.
That was really cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm glad you
Yeah.
it.
It reminded me a little bit of Patricia Highsmith's Strangers on a Train.
Yes.
Like whole,
I love
really
Highsmith,
well
so
done.
that's very flattering that you would say that. She's a great writer.
We'll turn it over to you, Sarah. Sarah, can you tell us what you're going to be reading and set it up for us, please?
And how long should I be reading for?
We could do 10 minutes, but feel free to go over by a couple of minutes to find a good spot.
Or under.
Okay. Over or under is all good.
Okay. Pam Kowalski is a monster. It is out from Raw Dog Screaming Press as of May, I think. And the story, I set it up a little bit before, but I'll just refresh your memories. It's about a woman whose life hasn't turned out how she planned, and she's scrolling the internet late at night. And I think I'm going to start with the opening. So I think that's all you need to know. Okay, crime scene. I discovered Pam Kowalski on a late winter night. She practically apparated across my screen, her hair like black gloss, her smile a gash of red lipstick. My apartment was the top floor of an Astoria Queens walk-up. The landlord lived right below and had this thing about how all rooms had to be covered in carpet. This was 30-year-old filthy blue pile that my roommate and I begged him to strip and replace. He refused. Our eyes itched constantly. True story, this really happened. To suffocate the dust and mold, we spread clean white bed sheets over the carpet. This had the effect of making the entire apartment look like a crime scene. Murder had happened, or was happening, or would happen. Our home was murder in perpetuity. I've been sad lately, which was unusual. Typically, I was too pissed off to be sad. But things had been going downhill for a long time, and not just in my own life. It was like all of reality was hanging over an invisible precipice, about to tilt into something monstrous. Everyone was feeling this way. I could see it in my coworkers. I could see it on the street and in doctors' offices. We tittered with a nervous energy, like animals in tied bags about to be dropped into a river. I was on the common room couch that night, feet propped, scrolling my screen in the dark. Hot smoke wafted from the brightly lit crack beneath my roommate Punk Rock Dean's bedroom. He and his dealer, Sick Mike, whom he had mistaken for his best friend, were getting high. I didn't like them enough to want to join them, but I did notice, in a self-conscious sort of way, that I'd been excluded. Again. On screen, advertisements popped like hot corn kernels. It was impossible to distinguish one from the next. Now they were selling some kind of flexible dildo, or maybe a face massager. The actor said it had changed his life. He used to be worried about politics and war crimes, but his face dildo had taught him how to relax. That targeted advertisement ended. Why me? Did I seem like somebody who needed a face dildo to take my mind off war crimes? Then came a lady in a big hoop earrings with black hair, Madame Pamela. I've been vaguely aware of Madame Pamela for years. She was one of many crackpots who charged exorbitant fees for psychic video readings, which she called encounters. These encounters had made her rich and famous, so famous that even her fans had a name, Pamamaniacs. I don't know why I'd never recognized her before that night. She'd been a celebrity for a long time. My only explanation was that I was a very oblivious person, for various reasons, and also one very specific reason. I didn't tend to look outside my life or imagine the circumstances of the people I'd once known. But things bubble up, especially the stuff you try hardest to weigh down. What's that line? The past isn't over. It is even past. Isn't even past. Though Pam had been pretty in high school, that kind of bland, non-threatening, approachable pretty that the boys loved, money had made her beautiful. Her once frizzy hair was smooth, her pimply skin clear. Are you curious about the spirit world? She asked, her voice soft and seductive. Her body turned sideways to make her waist appear thin. Her face captured from a high and flattering angle. Why do women do that? Even at 40, they can't just sell a product. They have to sexy sell it. Do you wonder what dreadful drearies whisper their stories in my ears? Have you ever been alone in a room and suddenly felt eyes upon you? It's the creatures of the nether, and soon you'll see them too. Get your ticket to the big reveal on January 31st. Tell your friends. Tell everyone you've ever known, my beautiful Pamamaniacs. And then somehow she was looking just at me. Our eyes met in the dark. Trust me, she said. This is a revelation of biblical proportions. This is everything. I was already mad that some jerk on my screen was telling me that she had the answers to the complex problems of a falling apart world, a world that made less sense every day. Worse, she seemed to be trying to tell me that she could fix me personally. But what business was it of hers that I was broken? I despised her for that alone. But then, camera lingering, she tucked a lock of black hair behind her ear. The action reminded me of a girl from my wincing, painful past. A girl who had hurt me so badly that I still hadn't recovered. An asshole, in other words. A funny thing happened right then. Every amorphous bad feeling I'd had, every sorrow, every rage, these distilled. They became a perfect arrow of blame. I swear to God, I got goosebumps. Fuck me. Fuck her. Madame Pamela is Pam Kowalski, I said to the dark room. And then that's the first chapter.
Good stuff. Great stuff. And it even has a little bit of the creatures of the nether. Just keep it in our liminal theme there. Thank you, both of you, for very liminal space readings and for the liminal conversation. Before we sign off, I just want to thank everyone who's joined us in the comments. Our friends and colleagues. Thank you to Cliff. Thank you to Thomas and Christine and Lisanne. Thanks so much for joining us. I always forget. Last month I forgot, so I just want to remind everyone to tune into my friend Scotty Milder's podcast, Horror on the High Desert. It's a great show. Join us next month, September 25th. Joe Kaplan and Louisa Colon will be with us and reading and discussing. And Brian and Sarah, Brian, where can we catch up with you, or is there something to make our listeners aware about before we sign off?
This is the part I'm really bad at. You can find me on Facebook. I'm there, and then I have something coming out in Ellen Datlow's next anthology.
Oh.
And then other than that, you'll just have to try to find me in Los Angeles to catch up.
Fantastic. How about you, Sarah? Where can we catch up with you, and what are some of the stuff to look out for?
All the usual places, and I got a website if you want to sign up for my mailing list. And I forgot to mention that this new Stephen King anthology, The Stand.
Oh yeah.
At the End of the World as we know it. I have a story in there.
Looking forward to it. That just came out on Tuesday. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next month. Brian and Sarah, stay connected while we end the stream. Take care, everyone.